the thing. Which is probably also the problem. We've been doing that so people can see it later. But okay, it's set now.
All right. Okay, well, I guess I should be formal since it's being recorded. I tend to make it more conversational when it's, a group this size, but
Whatever works.
I will mention that I'm Katie Corpy. I'm the Director in Career Services, and we are located in Hedgecock on the top floor, and you should come by and visit and get support and whatever services we can offer in your career and professional development kind of initiatives or planning. Let us know, and we're happy to assist. You can schedule appointments, you can come to our workshops, you can, just ask simple questions on our website chat or, by emailing us. So lots of ways to reach us. We love to hear from everyone. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And I have to say, one time I was recording a presentation for a CJ class, and I shared my email.
Oh.
And I'm so glad that I figured it out before I got very far, because I thought, they can't see those slides. So there's that.
Yeah, not the same.
Yeah, it doesn't really help them very much if they can see, my email. So professionalism in the workplace. This is a fun topic. I think it's a good thing to keep kind of at the forefront of your mind, no matter where you are in your career. If it's, your first job, your, the job that you've held for a while, whatever situation you happen to be in. I think it's really important to keep professionalism at the forefront of your mind as you kind of move forward. So an overview is making a great impression. When in your current job and in the future, when you're working with kind of the job searching process, workplace communication and how to do that effectively, acting and dressing the part, related to interviewing and kind of on the job experiences, and then kind of that engaging in the day-to-day and kind of how that should go. And I should mention that I'm kind of following that format, but I'm also kind of peppering in the day-to-day conversation throughout the slides. So as I kind of go through, you'll notice that I'm making comments about kind of that experience day to day. And then also don't hesitate to jump in and be like, hey, clarification question, or just, I have, a quick question about this, that, or the other thing, or a comment or a recommendation that you've come across. So I can talk and I can continue to talk and talk. And I don't want to just, bore you to tears. So please don't hesitate to jump in, shoot me a wave or whatever. So making a great impression, I don't know if you guys are fans of The Office or Parks and Rec, but I happen to think it's really funny because there's a reason these shows exist and that they do so well is because things go wrong and things go well. And there's really good, demonstrations of life, art imitating life in these shows. And so I find them humorous and yet useful too in sort of these conversations. And my favorite, Michael Scott quote is, the only time I set the bar low is in limbo, which is setting the bar high, which is pretty darn impressive. It's actually pretty smart. But anyway, something that we obviously recommend, and I think is something that doesn't surprise anybody, but is absolutely true and important, is being timely, and considering what that means to others. When I have changed jobs and moved along throughout the years, I've noticed that for some people, being timely is being a half an hour early to work or 10 minutes early to work. It's not being sitting in your seat ready to work at 8 a.m. if your workday starts at 8 a.m. It might be 10 minutes too, or it might be, 20 minutes too, that they have, different expectations to what is considered on time, and the context really matters, when you're joining, a Zoom presentation, it's like, where's that sweet spot, 5 minutes before, 2 minutes before, should you jump in? And especially it gets tricky when you run into technical errors and then all of a sudden you're like, no. And then arriving for meetings that are in person and making sure that you keep in mind that, everybody's time matters and is important. One thing I really loved is I attended an interview where I was a part of a panel, and one of the panelists who was interviewing the candidate actually said, hey, I just want to let you know that I do have to step out of your interview early if it runs up until the hour, because I do have a previous appointment that I couldn't get out of. But I just want you to know that it has nothing to do with your interview and the success of that interview. It just has to do with some commitments I have. So communication and connecting the dots and making sure people know, it's so, so useful. And sometimes people just, they're reserved, or they have their schedule in their head and they don't even think about the fact that they can pass that information on. And it can be such a wonderful consideration. You know, if you're going to be late, explaining why you're going to be late, and being really cognizant of what that means to everyone else. There's that old saying, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you're forgotten. And that's, you know, obviously you don't want to be the person who people are like, oh, this person can't be relied upon. They're always coming in late. They're always leaving early. Just keep that in mind and what that means to the people you work with. Say hi and check in with others on a day-to-day basis, especially your supervisor. This is something that I have really learned over the years, and people have taught along the way, is that you want to check in and say hi and connect. It's like sometimes that can be intimidating. You're thinking, well, my supervisor's busy. They don't want, you know, me to interrupt what they're doing, but they usually want you to say hi and say, hey, is there anything that I can do today, or anything that you need me to take care of? Are you waiting on anything from me? It's not bothering your supervisor. It's just considerate. It's just a good thing to do, and it's good for the people you work with too. I have worked in situations in the offices where people can literally go throughout their day without ever saying hi or acknowledging you. It's really uncomfortable and it's terrible, and it makes you feel miserable at work. It really doesn't lend well to a nice environment. And people never believe me, but I'm completely an introvert. But introverts tend to miss that. You know, they're kind of like, oh, well, you know, I'm keeping to myself. I'm doing my job. I'm, you know, doing what I'm supposed to do. But really, people are expecting you to connect and reach out and talk and maybe tell a little bit about who you are, you know, along the way. So people want to know you, and it's just the right thing to do, even though sometimes it can be just awful for those of us who would rather just kind of keep to ourselves, you know, and enjoy getting the job done, you know. Use yours and others' time wisely. I can't stress enough being prepared for meetings. Sometimes you get the agenda in advance and you can review it, you can prepare. You might be on the agenda, and if you didn't look and you didn't realize there's a topic you have to present on, or provide updates on, or there's an area you might have a question on, or something like that, you might really miss the boat if you don't look at that agenda in advance and prepare, and bring dates, details, names, information, connections that people need to make throughout the course of that meeting. Complete any homework in advance. It's just the right thing to do. Prepare for your appointments, do some research, make copies, jot notes, take the time to be cognizant of the fact that people's time is valuable, and they're counting on you to be prepared, ready for that discussion, and ready to move, you know, the ball forward. And create methods for follow-up regarding projects. One thing that I really love in career services that existed prior to me moving into this role is they used Asana. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Asana, but it's actually an online tool that you can create a certain number of accounts within it for free up into a point. I think you can have something like 10 accounts. And then you can actually, you know, make assignments and to-do lists and all kinds of things within that, and due dates. And so we use that for our meeting agenda. And so when we go through the meeting topics, we will assign topics to people, or we'll put notes about where we are in the discussion. And it's so nifty because then people are all on the same page. Nobody's like, who's going to do this? Who's going to make that poster? Who's going to talk to this person? And so it really uses your time wisely. It uses other people's time wisely. And it ensures that there's no confusion. Some people use Slack. Have you guys used Slack? I haven't used it, but I hear it's really cool and similar to Asana. So tools like that can be really great and keep everybody kind of all on the same page, especially in the world of COVID, you know. And then doing what you say you'll do. We've heard from employers at job fairs that they've, you know, students have made some big promises. I'm going to send my resume. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to apply for this opportunity. I'm going to connect with this person. And then they fail to do that. And that really doesn't look good on anyone, you know. So following through on requests, connecting the dots when they've asked for information, sending that, closing the communication loop, you know, if they've requested something, following up, that kind of thing. Being self-aware. This is something that is just so important when on the job, is being very cognizant of who you are and what you bring to the table. Are you a big talker? Like, are you somebody who fills the airspace in a meeting? There's a person I will not name, but I work with that not every day, but around, I won't even get even more specific, but they can talk for an hour straight and never, never hear what you have to say. It's the worst. And it makes you feel like they've hijacked the meeting. Nothing gets done. People just feel really lost in those details, and it really isn't a two-way street, and that's not a good thing. So if you're a talker, somebody who tends to, take the floor and fail to hand it over, then by all accounts, make sure to keep that under control and be aware, and have others hold you accountable. Tell your coworkers, like, listen, if I'm over talking, just give me a nudge or whatever. Do you get lost in details? Sometimes people are like, well, how are we going to do this? And how are we going to do that? And maybe in conversations, that's not the time to sort out the details. Maybe, you break down into smaller, pockets or groups related to the project you're working on or whatever it happens to be. But know your ticks, the things that you do, and keep them under control. Remember that you're developing a network in your everyday interactions. So as you kind of, move through life, you might forget that every day your work is demonstrating your work. And so, it's like credit. You can't get, you can't demonstrate work history if you don't have it, and you can't get credit if you don't have it, which is kind of crazy. But you have this chance to demonstrate high level performance and have people who can speak to that, your coworkers, your supervisor. And so every day you have a chance to build relationships with people who can represent, your capabilities, your performance on the job. And it's a really good idea to keep that at the forefront of your mind, so that you're, not only is it the right thing to do good work, but to also keep in mind your the importance of what you do now into your future career goals. No one asks for help or calling for backup. Supervisors like you to be working independently and capable of being self-sustaining and working on tasks without having to, ask a question every few seconds. But a lot of times they're expecting you to check in. And if you don't, they kind of start to wonder if you're spinning out or confused or you're missing the boat. And they also, are counting on you to check in certain circumstances. A funny side story, as a paraprofessional, when I was a resident advisor a few years back, I handled an emergency. It was pretty big. There was a fight in the hallway. I separated the fight. I involved public safety. Like, it got real, and it was nuts. And then the next day I saw my supervisor and I was like, wow, things got wild last night. And she was like, why, what happened? I was like, well, there was this big fight. And she's like, are you kidding? Why didn't you call me? And I should have. And I don't know what I was thinking. And I had it under control. Everybody was safe and healthy, but I didn't involve the person that should have known, so that when she gets a call the next day, like, hey, is so-and-so okay? Any more details on this event, that she's in the know. So there are times where you can make a big oops and take it from me. It's not cool. Take cues from others. There's going to be a workplace culture. Pay attention to how people kind of operate, and complement it. Don't be kind of the person who's going against the grain, because that might be the reason why you don't end up being successful in the role. For example, here we're very considerate. We all like music, but maybe we have headphones on, or if we're in our own offices, maybe we turn up the volume on our music, and we don't use headphones, but we're cognizant that, people don't maybe want to hear our music. We take lunch breaks at certain times and our other breaks at certain times, and we're cautious about socializing. If there's a big event coming up, we don't compete with that. We buckle down, and we recognize there's a time to be social and there's a time to buckle down, and to be cognizant that other people have to-do lists that they have to tackle. So being personal, but not to the detriment of the productivity in the office. More impressions. I regret nothing. The end. Ron Swanson. He cracks me up. And I think it's really important that you're obviously, kind of in the grand scheme prepared to recognize, when you need to make some changes to the way you operate. But certainly, you're learning, so don't beat yourself up too much in the learning process along the way. We're all learning as people and professionals. People who get ready to retire, they probably learn something new every day of their life since the day they started their job. So when problem solving, consider possible solutions. Supervisors especially really enjoy when you come to the table with a possible solution. Maybe you notice something and you say, hey, actually, I noticed that we're having a problem with appointments, and how they're being scheduled or coordinated. People aren't getting certain information, or we're having no shows or whatever, and then coming up with a solution or a proposed approach or procedure or policy or plan that can show some really great initiative, but certainly recognizing that your suggestion might not be taken, and that's okay. But you're approaching things with a solution focused mindset, which is really impressive to people, because they feel like you're not just going to torpedo their day with problems. You're going to bring some solutions and some cool ideas to kind of address that. Understanding the chain of command. This is something that's super important. And it's not really spoken about, but if something happens and you don't agree with your supervisor, or you're frustrated, or you have to still consider the fact that this person is still your supervisor, and you still need to find a way to effectively work with them. And then if you're asking for permission to do things, or you're pursuing, an opportunity, that you need to work your way through the people in the way that descriptor, the structure thing, the hierarchy, the man, I can't remember the word, but it's terrible. But anyway, you guys get what I mean, I'm sure. If your supervisor is unavailable, then going to the next person on the list. So knowing how to connect with the right people and when, using titles and how to use them. When I'm working with students, I might refer to their professors, as professor, and use the professor's last name. But maybe when I reach out, maybe that's how I initially reach out to that faculty person, but then maybe they respond with their first name, and I can see that they're comfortable with me calling them by their first name. So then I do. But starting from a place of formality and kind of backing up as you see, you have a greater chance of kind of flattering them or not offending them if you start at the more formal and then kind of back off from there.
Katie, I just have a quick question, if that's
yeah.
okay, about titles. So one thing that I sometimes struggle with is for people that don't necessarily have advanced degrees, especially with women, using Miss or Mrs. Do you have any guidance on which to use? Because a lot of times, that information of which to use is not available in someone's bio, or whatever information is available on them. So do you have kind of a rule of thumb for approaching stuff like that?
Yeah, there's I would look at the title. If you can figure out if they are a professor, calling them professor and last name. If they Ms., just MS is the general kind of and then there's, I think it's MX, that is non-binary. So I'd have to, but I think if you should be able to find it pretty quickly. I think NACE recommends MX because it's non-binary. So that would allow you to kind of, approach things from you're not making assumptions about, preference and pronouns. So,
right. Okay.
But I would probably start with kind of trying to figure out what their preference would be. Like you said, if you can look at LinkedIn, sometimes that can help. Depending on the circumstances, they might indicate that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that helps. And then knowing your place, there's the old sayings, dress for the job you want. Certainly dress nicely, but know that if you want to be a fashion designer, but you have to set up a job fair. I will choose my shoes based on my work for the day. I love heels, but I will not wear them on the day of a job fair, or I'll change into them or whatever. And dress to impress, but also know that if you're, know what work you're doing that day. And I can't stand it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. I think that's a super dangerous path to take, depending on the circumstances. Sometimes you have to use your judgment, apply it in the moment, and that's what you're paid for. But ultimately, if you can ask, if you're not sure, then I would check in and err on the side of getting the experience, learning what the right methods or approach would be in the future, and then put that in your back pocket and be ready when you go into situations where you can apply what you know already, because you've already been there. You've seen this before, and you know the proper plan of action. We definitely run into those situations that have no procedures. It's like somebody tells you something, you're like, great, let me figure that one out, because I don't know how to handle something that just is completely off the wall and strange. Keep in mind that with difficult coworkers, supervisors, clients, there's, preparation can help prepare you to manage a situation. So the fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me sort of thing. It's not like it's the first time you've dealt with a coworker who's failed to follow through on a project, or a supervisor who might, not, help kind of lift up a project that you want to take off or something like that. These things happen. So respond to that in a constructive way. Follow up with coworkers, make sure supervisors are in the know, make it easy. If there's a project you're working on that's really cool and you need the word to get out on that project, then keep the supervisor updated, give them the highlights, send them an email. Hey, just wanted you to know about this really cool thing. Don't let that situation just kind of roll away out of control. Plan for it and become stronger from the work that you do with it. And this will just give you a really great thing to talk about when you interview. Like, yes, I've worked with somebody difficult and this is how I did it. And boy, it really worked in my favor, sort of thing. Take initiative, ask for projects, research, create, find what other offices or departments or professions are doing around certain issues or problems, and say, hey, I found this really cool research. Maybe something that we might want to use or apply. And so these are things that are really kind of cool to demonstrate initiative. Consider your talents and strengths and find ways to engage them. We have more fun. We experience greater growth when we're able to flex our strengths. And so if you know what you enjoy, have you guys done the Clifton Strengths Assessment? If you haven't, it's worth checking it out. It is so cool. What we do it in our office, and so anybody who's interested, we have to buy a certain number of codes to do that. But once we do, we have that set of codes, and we're happy to just issue them out to students and staff. And we can basically, you take this quick assessment, and then we can meet with you and discuss kind of the results of that assessment. And we only pay for the top 5 because it'd be cost prohibitive to try to do more than that. But there are 34 themes, but you get your top 5, and then it gives you a sense of your level of kind of talent in certain areas. My number 1 is restorative, which means I look for problems to fix, which makes so much sense because I love when I enter, my work environment, the first thing I'm like is, that's cool, but let's change it. Let's fix it. Let's do this. But the cool thing about my strengths is I also have context, and context is a person who values the past to know where we're headed. So I don't come in and say, let's change everything without paying my respects to the past. And I also have empathy in my top 5. So I also, empathize with the fact that where we are today is on the shoulders of the people who built where we've come from. And I'm not going to criticize. I just want to improve and make better what we're doing. And so I enjoy, solving problems and helping people. And that's kind of something I know very well about myself. And I seek out employment that allows me to fulfill that. And I get bored at work if I'm not allowed to find problems to fix and solve. And it's funny because there are positivity people. That's one of the strengths on Clifton Strengths. And I can be really offensive to positivity people. They're like, why are you so negative? But it's really just me wanting to make things great, So it's really kind of cool. And we're happy to do it for you guys if you're interested. And we can talk about how to use that assessment and the results for kind of your job search and all of that. It's really cool too, because it does give you a sense of ways to talk about weaknesses. One of the things that drives me bananas is when people answer the question, like, what are some of your weaknesses in an interview setting? And they're like, I'm a perfectionist. It's like, okay. And you and everyone else in the entire universe. So did you have something, Janelle?
Yeah, I just had and I apologize if you're getting to that also, but you kind of brought up a good point with your, your strengths and weaknesses, like the changing, coming in and looking at problems and trying to find ways to change them. I know that that's definitely been a thing for grad students because you have all of this knowledge and it's all very recent and you're like very up to date. And sometimes it's really hard when students get into jobs where things are a little bit slower and people have been doing this for 25 years. And I know that it can be difficult to find that like balance between like, let me help you update this, but also not make all of your new coworkers hate you for saying that everything that they are doing is old and outdated.
Right. Yeah.
And I know it's really hard coming out of grad school because you feel like you're such like, you're finally like, you're really up to date in this topic and you have all the answers for it. But figuring out like that line of not insulting everyone.
Yeah. It's so important because really it's recognizing that people we're standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, and so we have to recognize that for sure. And sometimes I think that's a generational difference too, the way people have come about, where they are in life, and it's being cognizant of that, and then and cautious in that, and kind of that's and so when I answer the question, when people are like, well, tell me what is your weakness, I'll say, I like to look, I might not get into the details of what Clifton's strengths are, but I'll say, I tend to love looking for problems to solve and improving, processes, but I also recognize and appreciate where we've been. And so, and I also appreciate the work of others. And so I always try to keep that at the forefront of my mind. And I try to be, appreciative of what exists now. So I'm not stepping on toes and things. And so that might be how I answer the weakness question. And so it's so much more genuine and real than saying, oh, perfectionist. Like, okay, sure. Got you. Yeah. Next question. So it's pretty cool. And that's a really great point. It is hard to be young and excited and like energetic and feel like, people are kind of, letting these opportunities go to the wayside. But, there is some benefit in that energy too. I mean, I'm sure your energy is exciting the people that you're working with and re-energizing their interest in their field of study. So, but that's a great point. I love it. And then you never know. You never know what opportunity will come of a situation that you get involved in. And so don't burn bridges. Recognize that people in your field may come back around. And it's your field may be very small, or your area of interest or research or study might be really small. And you just don't want to burn those bridges. You want to keep good relationships, and you can work with people and not have to like people, or you might know their behavior and you might see it coming a mile away and you're just smarter for it, sort of thing. So just never burn bridges, and always remember that your network is really kind of the difference between you finding opportunity and not. And no work-life balance with your professional life and boundaries. So, in our office, for example, we're cognizant of the fact that our students have a private life and they might not want to be friends with us on social media, though we love them and we connect with them, while they work with us. We don't pursue them on social media. And so, and I'm the same way with my social media. I don't really use it a lot. I'm not a huge social media person, but I generally will not pursue, a connection that, might jeopardize that boundary, so if a student reaches out to me, and certainly it depends on what social media we're talking about. LinkedIn, of course, like every student, it's like, accept, like, what can we do to help you, sort of thing. But when it comes to, that private life and friendships and being inclusive to the people that you work with, just be very careful and set mindful boundaries as to how much you're going to connect with others. And don't assume, this is just good advice overall. I just was talking to somebody who was working on a project, and it was sort of publicly announced that there's going to be a handoff of the materials to that project. And somebody might feel the need to be like, oh, that's so exciting. Where are you headed? And that person was being canned. They were being terminated. And so if you're like, oh, where are you headed? That's so exciting. You could really, do something to embarrass that individual, and it's going to be very obvious and it's going to be very uncomfortable. So terrible. So don't assume that, it's good to be positive and hope for the best for people, but just keep in mind that it could be that something else is happening there, and maybe keep your be cautious about the comments you make and kind of the outreach that you give. Strive to deliver clear communication verbally and writing. Electronic means, I've noticed, especially, I don't know if you guys have been engaged with chat, like the Google Hangout chats and things, but things come off differently in a chat. And, if something has a potential to become heated or emotional or complex, the chat might not be the place to do it. I actually just made an error with this where I said, hey, let's just do this, and I could see the bubble, where they're like waiting to type, and then they're like, listen. And they said, I thought we were a team here. And I felt so bad. And so I called them instantly and I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make light of this. And I just kind of thought you had this under control, sort of thing. And I just had to clean it up. And so you have to know that with the chat, features and stuff, they can be really handy for those quick conversations. But if something has a potential to escalate or to be emotional or those kinds of things, that you're going to want to pay attention to that. If you don't understand, ask, get clarification. It's really hard to do that, especially when you're new. You kind of feel like you have to show your moxie, show your knowledge and your worth, and like, oh, I've done this type of report before. And then you're like, crap, I don't know what that looks like or the structure or whatever. Ask the question. It's okay. Supervisors expect that. If you suspect others are confused, ask for clarification. I'll talk in circles. That's something that I do. That was feedback somebody gave me. They're like, Katie, when you describe something, it goes round and round and round. I was like, you're so right. And I realized what I was doing is I was waiting for acknowledgement from the people that I was supervising, that they understood what I was saying. And really all it was is I should have just said, hey, do you understand? And they're like, we got it, Katie. And after that, I started doing that. So instead of just talking in circles like I do, ask for, if they need some clarification or if they're good. Consider your use of language. I am horrible about using idioms. And I was talking to an international student and I was like, I'm so sorry to leave you hanging. And she looked at me and she was like, what? So keep in mind that not everybody understands the language, especially if that's embedded in written correspondence. And know who your audience is. We just launched the Wildcat Resource Network about a year ago now, and it's been kind of slow to take off because we're trying to find a way to operationalize it. Right now, it's kind of a hand selected. Somebody comes in and says, hey, I'd like somebody in my field to review my resume. We'll connect them with somebody in the Wildcat Resource Network, which is a network of alums that have said, we're happy to do this. So I might say, okay, you should contact this person. They'll be happy to help you out. But in our marketing of that, we called one of the options Welcome Wagon, which I know what that is because it was a joke in my family. My dad was messing with somebody and he's like, Welcome Wagon, like, well, I'm the Welcome Wagon. And he was being obnoxious about it. But that's not a term that current students know or understand. So the whole idea was like just relocation tips and tricks. If you're coming to an area you're unfamiliar with and you want to know where a place to get affordable housing or something like that is, then you might consider contacting somebody for the not welcome wagon, because that doesn't. So I think we renamed it to like relocation something or another. But just remember, your audience might not be savvy to the terms you're using, or they might be old. So update them. In missing or miscommunication situations, always come from a place like, oh, I must have missed your email or something like that. It's so much more polite, and people realize their error. So if they've missed an email, or they haven't followed through on something, and you're just like, hey, I must have missed this, they feel like you gave them a break, a professional courtesy of sorts, and you're not like, hey, I sent you an email, where's your response, sort of thing. Those things are really, really careful ways to protect a professional relationship. And if it looks like you're being accusatory or really overly direct, that could put people on the defense. And now you've lost that person from your network or your team, because then they'll always be on the defense thinking you're messing with them. Watch for errors and mistakes, work to fix them right away, know who should be made aware, make small mistakes, not big ones, anytime you can. It's hard to, it's hard to say that in general. I think about nursing. I talk to the nursing students, and there are big mistakes in nursing, and there are small mistakes in nursing. So you know what they are, from a professional standpoint. Just make sure you know who should know, and how and when, and the actions that need to be taken. Reread and proofread anything in print. These things can go horribly awry. You might have heard of times where, in the customer service realm, people have accidentally leaked information about, this customer's crazy, blah, 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 blah. And it's not something they ever thought would be publicly viewable, but then the customer finds out that they're known to be nuts or whatever, and that's just completely wildly inappropriate. So be careful about how you put things in writing. One of the things that we have in our office is we have we have Handshake, that we post jobs and that. Well, employers have to request access to NMU students, and we check them out. We really want to know that if we're going to allow them to post opportunities to students, that they are going to be legitimate and good opportunities worth students' time, and there's nothing creepy or strange about what they're requesting, and that they have an established place of business and all of that. And that we have a spot where we know why we did not approve that employer, so that the other person knows, other individuals who are looking at that employer know what the issue was. And thankfully I was doing there are other people in the office who usually do that. I was the one doing that during the summer to help out when other people were out. And I put my internal notes in the external notes section where the employer could see. But thankfully, we're very succinct and professional about what we write. And I had indicated something about not having an established address or something like that. So the employer was kind of like, okay, thanks for the heads up, sort of thing. So it didn't go horribly awry. But I was like, like, whoops. And those are things those are errors that can really go awry. So just be very savvy and aware to what databases, how they work. When emails get forwarded, I wouldn't put anything in writing, that wouldn't want the person to see. Some things too, they can be FOIA. They can be requested through the Freedom of Information Act, and it's everything that's got that person's name and whatnot in it. So just be smart about what you put in writing. Not that I'm not that I'm saying be closet mean. I'm just saying, just be smart about, we all get upset or frustrated. Make sure expectations are clear. Maintain that professionalism. And know what's common knowledge versus inside information. Sometimes you get privy to knowledge that isn't common knowledge to the general public, or to students or other students or staff or faculty, or just other people in the work world. And if that happens, be aware of what can be shared and what can't be, and then protect that, because you don't want to get a reputation of being untrustworthy. In job searching, one of my favorite things that you may have heard before is when you're interviewing, using the acronym STAR as you're answering interview questions. This is so great because for me, I talk in circles. We've established that. But also, I've done a lot of interviewing where we ask a question and the interviewee gives a great story. They're like, this happened. It was nuts. And we're like, whoa. But then they forget to say what they did or what ended up happening because they're so wrapped up in telling a great story, which telling a great story can really help us get to know that person, their personality, what they think is funny or what they think is stressful or whatever. But it doesn't help us understand them as a worker. And so this acronym reminds you in interviewing to give all the details that the interviewer is looking for. So describe the situation and what happened. Describe what you did in that situation and then the results, and so articulate that outcome. And the example I use is, tell me about a time you faced conflict while working on a team. And I had a student that I was supervising say, hey, Katie, we have a lot of fun in staff meeting. Oh, kitty. We have a lot of fun in staff meetings, but we feel like we're not getting through the agenda. It's super frustrating. I probably shouldn't call the cat because it probably makes it.
Ways to be professional. You can't
Yes.
right in front of the camera.
Oh, that's so funny. It's just perfect. So when the student said that, it made me, the wheels start spinning, and I thought, okay, well, I don't want that to be the case. So what I did is I prepared for the next staff meeting, and I said, okay, we're going to discuss what our expectations are, what we like and what we don't like about what's going on in our meetings. Maybe we add something on the agenda where we talk about, where we have our kind of extraneous ideas, our thoughts, and ultimately in the end, after we had that meeting and we implemented the changes to our meeting, I had a more patient and dedicated staff. Everybody was happier. We were getting through the agenda, that kind of thing. So being able to close the loop, we'd have a great time, and it was funny, and we loved our staff meetings, but ultimately we weren't as productive as we could have been. So I was glad that that came forward, and that was something that was recommended. So in that, you're also, you're indicating, by me talking about it in that context, I'm showing that I can facilitate a conversation that might be heated. I'm explaining that I can organize information, that I can approach things from a thoughtful way, bring our original expectations, things like that. So you're highlighting your strengths as you're answering that question with that format. And then another thing that's a really great way to go is using an elevator pitch, that 30-second overview of who you are. This is a great thing to have kind of on hand and to practice and always have it sort of top of mind, because you never know. You don't get to plan for that instance, that sudden moment where, the elevator pitch is by nature described as you have that chance to ride the elevator with the CEO of the company you want to work with. Here's your big chance to shine. You can't sit there and practice in that moment. You have to be ready. And how many times have you talked to somebody and forgot to ask their name, or you maybe forgot to tell them your name or something like that? So this is a really good thing. And it's so funny that Janelle, that you have cats, because my first thing that my mind goes to cats when I'll be like, I have cats, I forget what I want to say. And so it's good to have this at the forefront. You don't just kind of ramble about something not useful. You say something, although that makes me like you more that you have cats, but maybe the CEO of a company might be like, why is she telling me this right now? So an elevator pitch that's well planned and well developed can really make you shine. So you talk about your name, your present status, an overview of your skills and experience, what you know about them, what you expect that you can offer, and any questions that might be useful. So if I were going to give an example of an elevator pitch that I would give, and obviously I'm not job searching, but I work in career services. So my goal is students and developing their skills and giving them opportunities. So I might say, hi, my name is Katie Corpy, and I'm actually the director of career services at Northern Michigan University. And I am so excited to meet you because I talk with a lot of students on a daily basis. And when I do, they tell me about these exciting ideas that they want to execute and that they really want to work for your company. Do you guys ever offer job shadowing or interviews in the area of internships and that? And if you do, is there somebody I can reach out to and contact? We'd love to connect with you guys. So you have a great operation or company. We really value what you do for the community. And then, so something like that, if I say that rather than I have cats, then maybe things move forward and life is better for everybody. Except for my cats, who don't get any, opportunity to be known. Balance being humble and effective with marketing your skills and abilities. So, you might get asked the question, why should we hire you over another candidate? And you don't know the other candidates. So focus on your skills, your strengths. Don't say, well, I'm so much better than X, Y, and Z. Focus on why you're great, what you bring to the table, that you happen to have a specialty in a certain area, or you participate in a very similar project and you feel like the things you learned from that project will really dovetail beautifully into the work you'd be doing with that company or organization. So keep that in mind, that you don't want to be somebody who doesn't market yourself well, but you also don't want to be that, that person who just thinks that you have all the answers either. And be prepared to explain who you are, what you want, what interests you in that employer, that opportunity, whatever it happens to be, because people are going to want a clear understanding of who you are and what you bring to the table. And especially if you do that in your networks, then people will be like, oh, I got to get a hold of so-and-so. They're wanting to do research in this area, or this person really happens to love this particular work or whatever. And then they contact you, and all of a sudden, because you were overt about what you wanted, people knew and they could help connect you to opportunity. Convey genuine interest. I had an alum who said, hey, I got offered a job, and when I got offered, they said, we didn't think you wanted it. And that's not a good thing. That's not a good position to be in. You know, if you go to an interview or you go through an interview process and you're like, I don't know if I'm feeling this employer, this opportunity, that's okay, because you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you, but you don't want to throw that interview and then regret it later. So make sure that you convey excitement, enthusiasm, and demonstrate that you want it, because maybe you'll get overlooked if they think that you lack energy towards the opportunity. They might get the drift that you don't want it, and then maybe that doesn't amount to a job offer. So that's no good. Following directions, nothing shows that you have attention to detail than following directions. Job postings will say things like, don't call our office, there are no inquiries sort of thing. Or, they might say to address your cover letter a certain way, or we only want 1-page resumes. That happens to be a thing for grad school and things like that too. Paying attention to those things are really important, because if you can't follow directions in the most important step to getting the job, then what does that say about your on-the-job work? Tailor resumes, cover letters, correspondence to specific employers and job opportunities. Make sure to do some research. Develop a plan to address potential multiple offers. If you're applying for multiple jobs, don't blow off an employer or turn them down without having a plan in mind. This might be something that maybe you're applying for multiple jobs and you can preemptively ask about their timeline, or and then if you're interviewing for multiple jobs, maybe you feel the need to disclose at that time that you are applying for other jobs and that you've got another interview next week or something like that. But keep in mind your negotiation power. If you are really early in the stages, maybe you don't want to tip your hand too much, but you also don't want to surprise the employer, and now they've invested time and energy in trying to bring you on as a candidate, and now you're bailing on them. So keep that in mind. Use your cover letter to answer questions about what people need to know about you as a candidate. Are you relocating? Are you obtaining some certifications in a certain timeline? You're putting just what you've completed on your cover letter or on your resume. So answer some of those questions. Employers will appreciate that, and maybe they might further you in the process because they know, okay, well, just because, Katie's applying for this job and she's currently living in Marquette, that does not mean that she does not plan to be closer by eventually. She has housing sorted out. She's a great applicant. Why not keep her in the pool? And then prepare for the offer. Know what questions to ask when they offer, like, oh, great, when do I start? If you hang up the phone and you don't know when you start, then you got a problem. And then, if you do plan to decline because of another opportunity, then make sure that you're prepared to word that in a way that's thoughtful, because there's a lot of money and time and resources and efforts to onboarding new staff, and you do not want to blow people off. It will not go well. And then feedback, ask for it often. In the absence of information, people will fill in the blanks. It is so funny. I've seen this time and time again. It's the biggest thief of good relationships of individuals, because they're like, well, this person's not talking to me, so they obviously hate me. Like, no, that's not what's going on. This person just has a lot on their mind, or they have a busy day. Or your supervisor may really appreciate the work that you're doing, but they haven't had time to give you that feedback. So ask for it, and don't assume that just because you haven't heard from your supervisor or something like that, that you're not, performing. And maybe there's something you should know, and you're asking preemptively so that you're prepared to make changes. Understand and appreciate differences in work styles and personalities. One thing I'll hint, because I know we only have about an hour, right, for this. Okay. With MBTI,
nothing like cuts off at an hour. If you go a little over, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. The MBTI, if you guys haven't had a chance to look at that too, that's a great, area of kind of finding out a little bit more about you. And for me, I'm a feeler in a big way. I'm an INFP. And so I feel things and I use my feelings to make decisions. And people who are thinkers used to really confuse me because I would feel like, how could you be so heartless, sort of thing. But it's not that they're heartless. They're just making decisions based on a different approach. And knowing and understanding that, I value that I know that I'm using my heart, they're using their head, and together we're making a wise decision. So appreciate the differences in others, know that it complements the work that you're doing as opposed to putting up walls towards it. And I had a student say, they got a bad vibe in an interview, and they thought that the person didn't like them, so they thought that's why they didn't get the job. And if you let yourself get in your head with some of that stuff, it might get in the way of you performing, because you're starting to erode your confidence by convincing yourself of something that really it may just be their conversation style or the way they interact with people. They're just not a super friendly person or a bubbly person. So if that's the case, that's okay. That doesn't mean they don't like you. So don't let some of those differences in personality and people hinder your performance. Try not to take things personal, but know if things cross a line, know if things are getting into the area of harassment, discrimination, somebody's not being inclusive, those are problems and they need to be addressed for sure. But sometimes it's not personal. It's just people are being people, and we all have our faults. Keep your thoughts and emotions in check. Be aware of your body language, your facial expressions. There are some people that you're like, I know exactly what you're thinking because I can see it all over your face. And it gets especially weird now with masks and social distancing. Like, I feel like when I look at people, I'm trying to like smile so my cheeks come out of my mask, but really I'm just like, and it's really freaky. So keep in mind that people need to know kind of what you're doing. And I hear a lot with people like, I sneezed and everybody looked at me like I'm going to take the world down. So seasonal allergies are a thing. So people might sneeze, try not to give them the stink eye sort of thing. And then just, acknowledging, well, I wish I could shake your hand sort of thing. Those are ways that we normally would connect with people, but we can't in this time. And knowing your tics, side silly story. When in a previous job that I held, somebody brought a meeting bingo sheet to our meeting, and it was like so-and-so will take their pen apart, and so-and-so will hum a tune, or it was all these things that we all do in meetings, and ironically it said Katie will not take this bingo sheet, because my empathy is on fire all the time. So I'm always like worried about, like, I don't want, the person leading the meeting to feel bad because I'm screwing around playing bingo. So when they passed the sheets around, I didn't even know that was a block. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And it passed. And later I'm like, oh, Katie will not take a sheet, because we all have these things that we do and we become known for them. And, that may be a good thing because they're like, oh, Katie's an advocate for others, but it also may be super annoying, like clicking a pen, all meeting long and stuff. So be aware of the things that you do that might be obnoxious. Phone etiquette, if there's a preferred greeting or a preferred format and voicemail settings, leaving detailed messages. My biggest pet peeve here is remembering that if you're going to leave a message and ask for a callback, not to like then immediately leave your office for 3 hours. Like, say I have something that I will be working on, but I'll be back in my office at 4 or something like that. Taking messages for others, getting first and last name, all the details, what's next. Considering whether you should call or email. Sometimes having something in writing versus making a quick phone call can be the difference between something going more smoothly or not. Cell phone usage, this is huge. Know people's boundaries with cell phones. It may be that people don't mind you texting during work hours, but they really get turned off by you bugging them outside of work hours. Or maybe they don't like to be texted at all, or maybe they would prefer text. And obviously there's going to have to be some common ground where everybody kind of, it can't be personal to everyone everywhere, because how would you possibly stay on top of that? But keep in mind that people have different feelings on their cell phones, because they're not always a part of work. They might use them at work, but they're not necessarily paid for or compensated for them. So, and the other thing I learned very quickly is, if somebody's like, oh, well, can you give me so-and-so's number? Then you would say instead, let me take your number. I will get it to them and they can give you a buzz. And then they can choose how they're going to make that return call. Email, being concise, leading with a greeting, hi and the person's name, including a proper signature line. There might be some expectations there. Responding at the top of the email instead of the bottom. So people are like, why am I just reading my own email? Did they fail to respond or did something go missing? Maybe it makes sense to respond or reply to an email versus starting new. Pay attention to if messages are clipped and you indicate like, see my message below, it might not have been included. So watch for that. And remove information that might not be needed or should not be forwarded. So sometimes, we get emails to careers, it gets forwarded to me and it says, should I respond? And I will delete that and I'll let the person know I'm going to respond. And then that way it's only that student, inquiry or the employer inquiry or whatever that exists in the return email. Consider whether or not, emojis or punctuation are good. Sometimes people include that and it's fun. And sometimes it's like, nope, that shouldn't be in there. Reply all versus replying just to the individual. There are some times where it's very evident, that nobody needs to know this information that's on that reply all list. It's like, knock that off sort of thing. But there are times where that is appropriate because, maybe you're working on a team. And I just tend to hate reply all, but I have learned there are times where I have to use that. But I like, being considerate of people's times and the fact that they maybe don't want me to reply all. And then BCCing and CCing, if you're copying a supervisor or something when you're communicating with someone, that suggests something. It suggests maybe you suspect that this isn't going to go well, or that maybe there's an issue or something like that. So acknowledge it, if it's an innocent thing, hey, I want to just keep my supervisor in the loop so you'll see that I've CC'd so-and-so or whatever. Keep that in mind. And blind CC, obviously they can't see that. So don't say I've CC'd if you didn't. And then when to set separate emails, including or having multiple topics in one. Sometimes that makes it really overwhelming because people are trying to check emails off like a to-do list sort of thing. Acting and dressing. This picture just cracks me up. The first time I saw it, I laughed for like 10 minutes. Oh man. So real quick on acting and dressing the part. When interviewing, be yourself. It's really super important that you keep your overall appearance put together and don't let that distract from what you say. Sometimes people wear a fragrance and it takes people's breath away. As nice as it might be, it's not always a good thing. So fragrance we would not recommend in an interview setting. Even food odors, like going to the restaurant and then going to your interview. It's like, whoa, did you have like, X, Y, or Z for lunch? Like, it's just distracting and it makes people kind of turned off. Make sure that you're groomed nicely. Don't use too much dry shampoo because you will look like that. And then stains and wrinkles and things, watch for those things. There was a student at a job fair was like, how do I look? And I was like, great. And then he turned around and he had all the marks on his shirt from taking it out of the packaging, but not ironing it. And I was like, no. So keep that in mind. Get a fresh haircut, show that you've demonstrated some effort and just kind of putting yourself together, because people can tell if you've tried or not tried. It's not that you have to have your hair up or down or anything like that. You just have to demonstrate that you've put an effort into your appearance. Consider the industry and the company, organization, do some research. When you interview for construction work, you're still going to dress in nice clothing, even though on the job you're not going to be wearing fancy clothing. Once you're hired, it might be appropriate to be more expressive in the way you dress, but know there's a time and a place. Casual Fridays don't mean sweatpants, that kind of stuff. Your effort shouldn't slide. So you should always make an effort to try to put yourself together, even once you've landed the job. And the culture of the company organization matters. Obviously, be cautious about what you're doing that day and being aware of what you should be doing in your field. Don't forget the importance of first impressions. There was a show called Brain Games. I don't know if it's still on, but he goes into a mall dressed like a newscaster, and he has a cameraman with him, and he starts saying ridiculous news. And he's like, hey, did you guys hear that they gathered up all the redheads and won't let them vote? And the people were like, what? You know, and so they, instead of questioning the silly news that truly isn't real, they are instead kind of agreeing with them and saying, oh, that's terrible, they should let the redheads vote, that's terrible. And I guess we believe just about anything in these days and times, I guess. But um, but but when it comes down to it, you know, people believe what they see, and so you can't fight that tendency in a person to have a that first impression kind of convince them one way or another whether or not you can do the work that's in front of you. And imagine if your doctor didn't come in scrubs, they came in SpongeBob sweatpants, and you'd be like, I really can't do this. I'm going to need to go somewhere else. And they're not just important in the interview process, those first impressions. You want to make sure that when you're handling serious matters, when you're doing certain work, that you definitely take it super seriously, what you're wearing and how you present yourself. Do your research. Employers know you're on a budget, but invest in nice pieces. Do some practicing with what you wear. The more you try it, the better you're going to be at doing it naturally, and it's not going to be so hard, especially in a cold weather climate. You know, static is not our friend here. And I have worn some skirts that are like, I want to climb to a level that I can't I can't wear that appropriately. So, you know, when they get staticky and whatnot. So practicing can help you. Caring for your shoes and taking good care of your stuff in this type of climate is hard. And so if you practice it before it really matters, then you're ready to do so, and do so, you know, pretty fluidly. This is my last slide, just engaging on the day-to-day. We spend a lot of time at work, so you might as well enjoy it. So connect with projects you love, connect with people, celebrate and acknowledge your accomplishments. And one of the things that I love is there was a leader in residence who used to come to campus, and he'd say, like your job or change it. You know, don't force something that doesn't work. You know, and if you can't enjoy your work, then change it up. Find something that you do love and you do enjoy, because you're only bringing people down with your complaints or frustrations or lack of initiative. Read the mood of the day or week, preparing for something big, or if it's busy, make sure that you're aware of your surroundings and what's going on. Use appropriate humor. It can really create levity when things are stressful, but know when it's appropriate, when it's not. And then positivity, people can feel like that's almost overly optimistic, so you have to keep that in mind. But we feel it when positivity people aren't around, whether you think or not. You tend to go, man, so and so is out of the office today, or not in the lab today. Man, I just miss them, because they bring this energy that's positive and moves things forward. Step up and offer to assist others. There's a Dairy Queen employee who she's like, I wanted to learn everything and I wanted to do everything perfectly. I was like, that's so cool, because she said, I want to be able to train myself and do it right. I want to help others, and I want to deliver excellent customer service. And she worked at Dairy Queen. She was like, I want to know all the stations. I want to know everything. And when you're that kind of worker, there's no end to the things that you can accomplish and do. Approach each day with intent to grow and develop. Build a professional network, challenge and support each other, say please and thank you. And so, yeah, so if there's anything more that we can help with, sorry that I went a little long. I was worried it was actually going to be short. So, so apparently not. But anything we can do to help, we're happy to do so. We love chatting with students and faculty and staff, and we just love you guys. So.
Thank you so much. I'm going to cut the recording. We can do some questions, but anyone that's watching this later can definitely send questions to the graduate email or to Katie directly. If you have any feedback, thoughts, and things that you're unsure about, that's definitely an open thing, I assume, on your end too.